Fun. What a great crowd out there. And it is an exciting meeting. We have a lot of things to be happy about and to celebrate and to recognize and congratulate. So let's start and get busy. So first, a video of this meeting is streamed live on YouTube and will also be available on Facebook and the Village website. I'd ask to call the meeting to order and ask Clerk Saladino to call the roll.
Trustee Augustine.
Here.
Trustee Gale.
Here.
Trustee McGee. Trustee O'Brien.
Here.
Trustee Peterson.
Here.
Trustee Thompson. President Kukler.
Here. And Trustee Thompson had a death in his family, and so he's out of town, and we are keeping his family in our thoughts and prayers. Tonight, one of the great things we're going to do is the oath of office for Lieutenant Reed Selvik, and that means that his family is going to help us with the Pledge of Allegiance. We're going to have 7 helpers who many of them are going to introduce themselves. I think some of the older siblings may have to introduce the youngest at least. But we have 7 children coming to help us with the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody should stand. Reed, you can move that down.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, fantastic. Now tell us who you are, where you go to school. And you can look at the camera so all your friends see on Facebook. Awesome.
Say, my name is Ryder.
My name is Ryder, and I'm going to preschool.
Nice.
My name is Jet, and I'm in 1st grade.
Fantastic.
This one's Skylar, and she's in preschool.
Okay, Skylar.
I'm Lily, and I'm going to be a freshman at Lakes.
Congratulations.
This is Jazzy, and she doesn't go anywhere.
Plenty of time for you, Jeremy.
I'm Evan, and I'm a junior in high school.
Awesome, Evan. Thank you. And thank you. You guys did great, and we appreciate it. Two of the items that we have on tonight's agenda are oath of offices, one for our fire captain, Brian Kramer, and one for our Lieutenant Reed Selvik. So we're going to start with Fire Captain Kramer, and I know he's joined today by his sons, Will and Patrick, his mother, and I believe his friend, Lindsay. So whoever would like to come up for the oath, please feel free. And let me go on a little bit. On June 19th, 2024, the Grange Board of Fire and Police Commissioners approved Lieutenant Brian Kramer's promotion to the rank of captain to fill an opening. Brian is a 26-year veteran of the Grange Fire Department and has served as lieutenant since January of 2015. In addition, Brian has earned numerous Illinois Office of State Fire Marshal fire certifications and his associate's degree in fire science technology. He's also served on MABUS Division 10 fire investigator, CPR instructor, and held positions on the Foreign Fire Insurance Board and numerous committees and local 2338 or 2038's executive board. Brian's lived in the area throughout his career. His knowledge of and love for LaGrange proves to be an invaluable resource to the department. Brian has 2 college-age sons who have joined him. Will attends Elmhurst, and Patrick attends Colgate in New York. So with that, I'd ask Clerk Saladino to do the swearing in.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Brian Kramer,
I, Brian Kramer,
having been appointed to the office of Fire Captain
having been appointed to the office of Fire Captain
in the village of LaGrange
in the village of LaGrange
in the county of Cook,
in the county of Cook,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office of Fire Captain
the duties of the office of Fire Captain
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Captain.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Captain. Next up is the oath of office for Lieutenant Selvig. Reed is joined by his family of 7 children and his wife, Rita. I believe maybe your brother's here, Brother Roy. Thank you for joining us, who may have his family along also. Sorry that they didn't get up for the pledge, but come back next meeting. We'll get you on there. And along with the father-in-law, Alan, and mother-in-law, Cindy. So thank you, everybody from the family, for coming out and supporting Reed. We really do appreciate it. With the appointment of Lieutenant Kramer to captain position, a vacancy in the rank of lieutenant was created. On June 19th, 2024, the LaGrange Board of Fire and Police Commissioners approved firefighter Reed Selvig's promotion to the rank of lieutenant to fill this vacancy. Reed's a 14-year veteran of the LaGrange Fire Department, being appointed on August 31st, 2009. Reed's been a small tool coordinator, a member of MABUS Division 10 TRT team, a preceptor for the Loyola Paramedic Program, and served as vice president on the Foreign Fire Tax Board. Reed has obtained numerous Illinois Office of State Fire Marshals fire certifications, has obtained associate's degree in fire science from the College of DuPage, and is currently enrolled in Columbia Southern University seeking a bachelor's degree in fire administration. At this time, I would like all the family, and feel free to have the in-laws and every nieces and nephews come on up, whoever you want, for the oath of office. And again, make sure you smile for Facebook and all social media.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Reed Selvig,
I, Reed Selvig,
having been appointed to the office of Fire Lieutenant
having been appointed to the office of Fire Lieutenant
in the village of LaGrange
in the village of LaGrange
in the county of Cook,
in the county of Cook,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office of Fire Lieutenant
the duties of the office of Fire Lieutenant
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations, Lieutenant.
Thank you.
What's that? See John Janowski. That's John Janowski. As the fire department leaves, we do appreciate all your service and thank you. And we still have a full house, and that is because we have a proclamation declaring Monday, June 24th, 2024, as Janine McLaughlin Day in the village of LaGrange. They gave me a list of names, and I know I'm going to forget some, so I apologize, but I do want to recognize a lot of the people that are here today to support Janine. We have former village presidents Tim Hansen, Liz Asperger, and Tom Livingston. We have former board members Ken Eastman, Dave McCarty, Mark Langen, Nancy, Kenny. We have former clerks, John Barnes, Tom Morsch. We have tons of members from the community. I appreciate everybody coming out. I apologize if I skipped anybody that previously served on the board. We appreciate you coming out for this wonderful event. I think Trustee Augustine would like to share some words.
Yes, thank you, President Kukler. Set this up a little bit, and then it's gonna move to the center of the room. Why are we here tonight? Well, you know why. It has a lot to do with Janine. We all live, those of us who live here, in a historic town. Our roots predate the Chicago fire. And when it was founded, there were no neighboring towns, no Western Springs, no Brookfield, no Countryside, no LaGrange Park. But LaGrange grew quickly, adding homes, schools, churches with regularity. And its large central business district was a regional destination for locals and the new neighboring towns. LaGrange had just about anything money could buy, and it stayed that way for a very long time, nearly 100 years. And that's when national trends in housing and in retail turned everything upside down. Now this is where I was going to show you some pictures, but that's not going to work out tonight, so my apologies. But if you can imagine, a lovely LaGrange 100 years ago, black and white, gorgeous buildings, beautifully built, most of them, many of them still here today. And then fast forward to 70s and 80s, the pictures aren't so great. Buildings are covered up, full of soot, confused look, and a lot of for lease and for sale signs in the windows. Our decline and our remarkable comeback is a valuable civics lesson. And some of the best ideas and most remarkable tools for the turnaround came directly from residents and the community efforts they strongly fostered. What they did, and really one person in particular, in conjunction with the village, should inspire us all. This turnaround is worth sharing with future generations. And the people in this room tonight are proof. As President Kukler said, we have some esteemed former board members in the audience, as well as some very important movers and shakers who've supported this town through so much and seen it change and are truly proud of how we got here. So to tell us a little bit more about it, we're gonna try and keep it to around 10 minutes. We're going to invite up a few of those folks who were here when we went through the hard times and they brought us out. And we'll start that off with Tim Hansen, village president, 3 terms. I could read off a bio that would be very impressive, but I'll let him do that.
That's better. I swore I'd never be responsible for anything here anymore, but my name is Tim Hansen. I live at 74 South 7th, and I used to work here. As Trustee Augustine mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about the 50-year period since the mid-70s to now, and some of the changes that occurred. I moved to LaGrange in 1975 and bought my house in 77, and LaGrange became 100 years old in 79. It was, as Beth said, the regional shopping center. Sears, Montgomery Ward's, Kresge's, all were here. And it was an established and quite lovely upper end residential area with homes of a type, of a style. Not all were mansions, but so many of them were from the Victorian era when LaGrange was built. Our house on 7th Avenue, just over there, was a 2-flat when we moved in. It had 60 amp electrical service. It had a gravel driveway. People parked in the backyard. And that was sort of typical of much of LaGrange in that there were a lot of 100-year-old houses who had faded. And maybe grandma was living alone and couldn't quite keep up with them, with the big house. And maybe they just had never, this was not necessarily a place of mansions, although there are some, but it was a place of homes. There was a pressure at that time to replace a lot of the single-family homes with apartment buildings. That pressure has continued. It will probably never go away. But from Burlington south on 7th Avenue and Bluff and 6th and Kensington and others, there were a lot of homes owned by banks, owned by investors. And there were a lot of talk of apartment buildings. On my block, there were apparently a couple of women, Ann Haynes and a woman named Winky, who I never met, who fought against that trend. On North Madison, there was a proposal for a high-rise apartment building at the time, just before them. The downtown had, as I said, so many national chain stores. It was the Oak Brook of its time. Car dealerships. And those folks moved out when Oak Brook was built. The car dealerships moved to larger areas in Countryside, Hodgkins, and the village downtown struggled, sort of like the residential areas struggled. A lot of ideas were tried. Callender Court had a mall, and then it didn't have a mall. But there were pivotal changes that I think of that are not necessarily related to my buddy Janine, that occurred during that era that pointed towards what was going to happen in LaGrange. One was that in the 70s, LaGrange became one of the first communities along the Burlington to have alcohol. Some of you probably don't approve of that. I most certainly do. It allowed the spot to eat to become Palmer's. It allowed Bessie and Sam Magdalena's to develop the Grapevine and pointed to what would, over a long period of time, change the nature of what was downtown and encourage the rich restaurant development that we have. A second one was the sale of this building, originally built by the Township of Lyons. And by the way, on Wikipedia, still says that the Township of Lyons owns this building. You have to do something about that, Mr. Kugler. The sale of this building You know, the Carnegie Library had been torn down a few years earlier down the block. And the village shared this building with the township. And the village wanted to buy it. And honestly, I think the township wanted to sell it. But there was a lot of controversy about that. People feared that we would tear it down like the library. People feared that this would become an antique mall or other stores. And in an eventful evening, just a remarkable evening, there was a town meeting in this hall in which probably 400 people showed up to vote as to whether the township, it was a township meeting, as to whether the township should sell to the village. There were too many people. The fire marshal was appalled. And yet there were conversations, and they held a separation of the votes. And if you were against selling it, you moved to this side, and if you were for selling it, you moved to that side. And honestly, there wasn't much room in between to tell. I have no idea how those votes got counted, but the vote was that the township should sell to the village. It was a very important moment. And as it worked out, it established that this village and its government were here for preservation. We're here to keep this wonderful building. And it sent a signal as to where we would go as far as downtown and residences as well. The state established a funding mechanism by which villages could fund change and improvement and investment. The tax increment financing district, very controversial at the time. The TIF district helped us provide the funding for a lot of the things you'll hear about that happened since. So we're there with the desire to do well, the recognition that our business district is not doing well, the recognition that our residential district needs support. And fortunately, someone had the vision to talk to, guess who? To talk to the National Trust for Historic Preservation to look for models, to look for ideas as to how to bridge those gaps. The concern was that the businesses thought that the residents weren't supporting them. The residents thought the businesses were trying to take their money. And there was not a conversation. Janine brought in the Main Street program, which you'll hear more about, which got residents and businesses talking together, and the government as well. Owners and businesses working together, and that program helped really revitalize the downtown with its facade improvement program. All those cheesy aluminum false facades went down, and the buildings underneath shone through. It also prompted the recognition that we had to do something about the residential areas as well, and to provide pride. The establishment of the Historic District of Grange was a critical step in making it evident to people that I want to live in a historic district. This is a special place. I will get the driveway paved. I'll upgrade the electric because this is a special place. The streetlights throughout LaGrange were improved, and from then and on and on and on, you know where we've ended up. It's been a terrific journey. Lots and lots of people have been involved. But one of them, my partner and my friend Janine, was involved heavily in so many of those things and in others that you'll hear about later. I want to introduce to you David McCarty, former trustee, who would also like to follow up on that.
Thank you, Tim. I'm David McCarty. I used to live at 600 South Madison, only 40 years. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people get up to speak in LaGrange, and it always starts with how long have I lived here, and it's usually 30, 40, 50 years, or by golly, my family founded the community. Oh, that's right, that's Beth and Nancy. They did found the community. But Janine brought a special magic to the community. In two ways she brought magic to the community. One was the understanding that it doesn't take a lot of great ideas. It takes a lot of great ideas, but more importantly, a lot of great people. And she was a wizard at encouraging people to be part of the party. She knew how to get people together. She knew how to make them work. She knew how to keep them going in the same direction for the same ideas. The other was respect. She has a special respect for the fabric of a community, the history of our community, but most importantly, the people of the community. And she shows that respect in almost everything she does. My favorite Janine story is my first day on the Heritage and Architecture Commission, which she spent a lot of time on, of course. After the meeting, which included a rousing discussion of why the local plumber should not put a toilet on his sign in downtown LaGrange, we convinced him that he didn't need a toilet on his sign in downtown LaGrange. At the end of the first meeting, I'm 26 years old. I've been in LaGrange about 9 months. I don't know a soul. And this wonderful woman walks up to me and she says, "Excuse me, Mr. McCarty." I'm immediately shocked because I've never been called Mr. McCarty before. She said, "Do you have a minute to talk?" And again, surprised because I was just up here getting bombarded by all kinds of citizens, and she had the kindness to ask if I had a minute. And then she said, what I've heard her say since thousands of times, "First, I want to thank you for your service." And almost every time I hear Janine talk to someone who's been involved, and she's always talking to people who are involved, she always starts with, "First, I want to thank you for your service." And that makes such a big difference. She appreciates what people do. She knows how to get them to do their best. And she certainly helped people like me, new residents, understand what an important, special community LaGrange is. Some of her hallmarks that she put together: the Heritage and Architecture Commission, the Historic District, which was an amazingly clever way to stop the Illinois Department of Transportation from widening LaGrange Road. Were it not for the Historic District, we would now have 6 lanes of LaGrange Road coming through downtown LaGrange, and we would look like Orland Park, or worse yet, Countryside. She realized the importance of the personal care of homes in LaGrange and founded the Historical Society with the massive database of almost every house in LaGrange. If you're not aware of that, if you want to find out where your house was and when, go down there. They'll help you find out everything that's on it. And one of the most important, and what I found fascinating, was her ability to wrangle a team together for the Main Street. That was a very difficult concept. She got the businesses and the people together, and that was the most important step in saving downtown LaGrange. Each of these were important steps. Each of them Janine was critical to, and each of them she was able to bring more people to the table to help do the work, and she respected the work they did. Janine, I'd like to say thank you for your service.
Well, good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, and fellow LaGrangers. It's been a minute for those of you watching online. So my name is Tom Livingston. I served as a village trustee here as well as village president. And I'm going to take this from a slightly different angle. I got to pivot here. I got to take this in. I am looking at the Mount Rushmore of LaGrange right here, but with a lot more than 4 heads, I got to tell you. I come at this from a slightly different angle, and then by the time I started my village service, it was 2003. much of the foundation that had begun in LaGrange had been established. We had some momentum. We had some growth. Thanks to Tim, thanks to Liz, Nancy, everybody involved, and Janine, the many hands in this room. And so our job was to keep that momentum, to grow, to expand, to push those next horizons, but to do so in the spirit of LaGrange, not just any old way. And Janine is the foundation of the spirit of LaGrange. So when we would pursue projects, we looked ahead, we established those kind of goals, and Janine was ever present in those conversations. But she just wasn't looking backwards. It wasn't just about the rear view mirror. And I know the journey that we came upon, because as a youngster, I was, I'll say, taken to Slocum's. I didn't go there willingly, or McAllister's for scouting goods, or any spot to eat, any number of places. And then in high school, we got a newfangled video camera, the kind that has a backpack on the side and it wires into the camera, and it's about 40 pounds. And we took a film, and we took it from the library in the evening, some Saturday evening, because we were cool, and that's what we did, and we took it all the way up to Fannie Mae. And it was a dimly lit path in about 1984, 1985. So what came of that was that economic vibrancy that Janine, when you're on a growth pattern, what's the enemy of that? Complacency, taking for granted, not having an understanding of history, what's happened before. And Janine was always there, ever present for every decision that we made, to set a watch, lest our village fade. But as I said, she was also looking forward, because I see a lot of people in this room that were brought to village government by Janine, boards and commissions, village board, and everything in between. So she was looking ahead too. And so really, Janine, thank you very much. Every town needs a Janine McLaughlin. Every town needs one. But there's only one Janine McLaughlin, and we have her in LaGrange, and I'm very grateful for that. So thank you, Janine, and congratulations.
Good evening, I'm Mark Langen. I live at 601 9th Avenue, and I've been here since November of '85. So when we were talking about this evening, the two words that come to mind when I think of Janine are thoughtful and respectful. I think the folks that have spoken before me have touched on that. It's interesting because the first time I met Janine was during the Main Street things, when we were really trying to get business and residents together. And she didn't say, hey, come on, you got to get involved. I ran into her on the street and through a LGBA event, because I just opened my business in town. And she just started asking questions. Oh, what's your business? What do you do? What do you know about LaGrange? How long have you been here? What kind of things are we doing here? And I was learning a lot about the community. Much as Dave said, I was new to the area and just wanted to know what was going on. And I just kept learning things and talking to more people. And all of that, Janine was the conduit. She was at Plan Commission meetings. She was at board meetings. She was everywhere. It's cracking me up that she's covering her face, because we love her dearly, and we, we wanted to enjoy this evening. But she did a lot of great things. But what she mostly did was engage the community and connect the board with the businesses and with the community. You know, I was on the board during those days during Streetscape and the parking garage fight. And there was a lot of opinions on both sides of the table as we did things. Streetscape was absolutely necessary. Tim talked about the critical piece that TIF brought to this village. Brought us into a whole nother level. We had 3 restaurants prior to Streetscape. And prior to TIF, now look at us. We are still a regional hub. I work out in DuPage County, and I hear all the time about people coming to LaGrange because they love it. That all happens because of caring residents. There are official leaders in all this, and there's unofficial leaders. Janine led us all and did just great things caring about the community. The one thing I'll elaborate a little bit on was the parking garage. That was quite the fight. People were afraid it would ruin the community and cause all kinds of crime and trouble. Mr. Police Chief, I'm sure he's happy to know that hasn't been the case. Instead, we've got a vibrant, wonderful community with great energy and bringing in lots of sales revenue. We go up, we go down, but we stay a leader in the region, and that's critical. So back to where I started. Thoughtful and respectful. Couldn't have happened without Janine. She is a remarkable, caring woman, and we are better off for her. Thank you, Janine.
I get a handsome escort. This was planned. You know, my name is Nancy Kenny, and I have fantasized for years that I would come to a village board meeting sometime, and when they ask you what your address is, to give them all of the addresses of the places where I've lived in LaGrange. I've lived in about, I don't know, 10 different houses in different neighborhoods, so I know it pretty well. And I love it. And as far as Janine is concerned, she is one of my very dearest friends. We have known each other and first met each other, I think, when we were both expecting our youngest sons, Bill Kenny and Mike McLaughlin. And they're 52 now. So that gives you an idea of how long we've known each other. We've had a lot of adventures together. And before I get into some of that, I want to say, when I was listening to some of the other speakers speak, it made me think of, it brought back so many memories to me, because I have lived in LaGrange almost my entire life, of things that they talked about. The Carnegie Library. I remember going there as a little girl, and it was a beautiful library, but it was pretty small and kind of creaky. And the librarian there was, well, they were very strict. You had to be very, very quiet. And it was so quiet that they would not allow a phone in it. I don't know if they had a phone in the back room or not, but you were not allowed to call. The library didn't have a phone number because they didn't want any noise of a ringing phone. And I got along with the library pretty well. She kind of had some differences of opinion with a lot of people in town, but she liked me because I heard that she had a crush on one of my uncles. So I was in then. But anyway, so many other wonderful stories. When they talked about Janine, the Heritage and Architectural Commission, I was on it for a while, and I remember one of the plans we had to approve was Banyan Cove, and approve was Banyan Cove. And I love Banyan Cove. I mean, I might live there someday now. It turned out beautifully. But at the time, one of the questions that was asked, and some of you may have already heard this, why Banyan Cove? And they said, well, because there's a beautiful banyan tree out in front of the, not cove, but out in front of it. Well, it turns out it was a sycamore tree. But they didn't, I guess they wanted to keep the name Banyan Cove. But I could be here all night telling you little stories, and I'll just end with one. We talked about the downtown, and that's mainly what I'm going to talk about, the downtown and Main Street. And we were getting pretty desperate. I know a lot of people now, I see most of the people here, and it's like Old Home Week. And so most of you know exactly what I'm going to talk about, which is the downtown at the time was literally dying. You'd go up and down, drive up and down LaGrange Road, and you'd see for rent signs on almost every storefront. We didn't need parking at the time because there were plenty of places to park. Nobody wanted to come here. And so I remember one of the early, we tried these little piecemeal solutions of solving the problem. And one was, nod to Steve Palmer and my son John, who were, how old were you when you did, they were given the task of every Saturday morning, I think, they had to go and put bags on the meters so you wouldn't have to pay anything into the meters on the weekend. When was that?
That was me, might have been one of the others.
What?
2004, just kidding.
Well, anyway,
Late 70s.
they worked very hard and they tried hard, didn't you, John? But we needed more than having the meters bagged, you know, every week. So at a certain period of time, you know, when I was on the board, I would notice that the sales tax revenue was plummeting. I mean, every single month for, I think it was 16 months that I looked at, the sales tax revenue was dropping and dropping. Every month we would get less. And of course that was a great sign, a terrible sign, that the economy was failing. So what to do? Everybody, or so many people, were concerned. People who lived here, and of course the business owners in the village, were very, very concerned about it. But then the idea of TIF came up, and liquor, that was, I think, came just before TIF. And I remember going into meetings, heated meetings, where people were either for it or against it. And it was a very rancorous discussion. And so many people would say, well, F.T. Cossett founded the town and put the liquor restriction in. And so we should keep it that way, because that's the way it was, and that's the way Mr. Cossett wanted it. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore, because Mr. Cossett happened to be an ancestor of mine. And I got up, and this is not usual for me, but I said, well, F.T. Cossett was my great-great-grandfather, and I know a lot about him from my family, and he was a visionary, and he really wanted this to be a family town and the best town it could be, and I think that he would approve of liquor being served in the town now. And it apparently worked, because it kind of ended the conversation. But we needed more than these little piecemeal solutions. So then Janine started talking about Main Street, this Main Street program, and it sounded very interesting. And the first steps in doing something that was more of a comprehensive solution to the village's economic problems and Main Street was that we formed a committee of about 6 people. And I won't tell you who all of them are, because 4 of them have moved elsewhere or actually have passed away. And Janine and I are the only 2 still in town that were part of this committee. And we met, I think, every week and talked about it, and talked about Main Street and what should we do and blah, blah, blah. So finally, after a few months, I think we decided, well, let's open this up to the public and see what happens. And the 6 of us went out for dinner one night, and we were all speculating on how many people would be at this open meeting that Tim referred to. And the number went all the way from nobody to, I think I said about 150. I was the high guesser. And when we got to the village hall that night, there were over 200 people here who wanted to physically do something about the decline of the downtown. And Janine spearheaded it. She knew more about it. But a lot of us worked on it, and I'm sure Janine would want me to share that with you. And so Elizabeth Cornell is here, and wave Elizabeth, and Dee, and they were two of the original members. And a lot of the people here in this room, business owners, the beauty of the Main Street program and the reason why it worked is it was not just the village. It was not just the business owners or residents. It was all three. And all three of these groups had to work together. And they did. And so between the funds that were allotted from TIF, from tax increment financing, and Main Street program, the village turned around. It wasn't instantly, but it was very strong, and it was very gradual. And if those of you who weren't here at that time could see it when it was at its worst, I would say, and see it now, the difference is just totally light and day. I wonder if in the audience we could have sort of a show of hands of people who remember the village went before it did its economic turnaround. Come on, I know there are a lot of you here. See? All of these people know about it. They're business owners, they're residents, and they're village board members. And that's how it worked. And so it was a marvelous thing, and Main Street was a great success, as was the TIF financing. It was all the hard work of all the people involved. Now, I want to say one last thing, and it's about friendship. Janine and I, as I have told you, have known each other for a very long time. And she is one of my very dearest friends. And she's a wonderful person, but she makes friends. And I got a kick out of Mark Langen talking about her asking questions, because that's what she does. She wants to know about people. She wants to know about things. And that's what makes her such a special person. And I know she probably is a little embarrassed by this attention, because she was never sought attention. She just wanted to do the job, and she did. But this village, whether they were aware of it, as most of the people in this room are, or whether they're out there and they just take everything for granted, there always have to be some people who make the extra effort to make things work. And Janine happened to be the best person at the best time. And I love her dearly, and Janine, I'll always love you. And I know that we'll always love this town. This town is the best thing. Thank you.
Janine, I want to say congratulations. I've been knowing you for over 30 years. I just snuck on the mic real quick, but congratulations, Janine. Appreciate you.
Hello, I'm John Burns. I've lived in LaGrange 40-some years, and I have learned a couple of lessons, some from Janine. So I'd like to start by thanking everyone for their service, all the trustees, Mr. President, and staff, and department heads. The village doesn't run but for you guys, so thank you. And with that, I want to give you a couple of other lessons that I've learned from Janine, and I'm going to move the furniture, so never invite me over. But I want to address Janine in particular. So I got to know Janine when I served on the Economic Development Commission in the 1990s. I had the good fortune of being appointed to that commission the same time as former President Asperger. And during those meetings in the 90s, we also met with Main Street, became part of their meetings. But at the meetings in the evenings when the Economic Development Commission met, guess who was in the audience at all those meetings? Janine McLaughlin and Nancy Kenny, monitoring what was going on. And it was good. We had questions from, residents, but it was a level of commitment that we didn't see from other residents. And so there was that, what I call quiet leadership, being there, being interested, asking questions. And then several years later, trying to remember, it's probably around 2011, 2012, there was an election coming up. I was aware of the election, and there were people on the board that I knew. I assumed were going to run for re-election. They did. In any event, I got off the train one evening and stopped at a local restaurant over in the West End where I live. And I saw some people at the table with a set of blueprints. And I'm curious, nosy by nature. So I was kind of leaning over, seeing what was going on. Well, the plans were for the Stone Avenue station. And what was going on was the Stone Avenue station was they were going for funding to do some restoration work. And as I leaned over, Janine looked up and recognized me. Well, shortly after that, I got a phone call from Janine. Would I be interested in running as village clerk? And I said, why forever would I do that? And so we had a discussion, and she told me all the reasons that I should. I asked all the questions of what would possibly qualify me for such an important position, as Clerk Saladino knows. So after that discussion, it was kind of a recruiting session, I guess, very subtly, but with these kind of probing questions. Don't you want to be involved? Oh, you'd be so good in this. So I ended up running for village clerk and was able to, one, serve as our trustees and clerk and president and staff serve. And for that, I'm always grateful for that. But for Janine, I wouldn't know about that. And then because I was a curious, inquisitive person, I wanted to know something about the history of this aspect of LaGrange or that. So I happened to buy the Historical Society at some point. And there, I found Janine, and I found Mary Ann Sward, I found Marilyn Barber, and Ellie and others. What I found, what a resource. And but for Janine, that resource wouldn't have existed. And of course, the leadership of the Historical Society for many years was Janine. Even when she wasn't serving as president, she was doing that kind of quiet leadership that we all became aware of. And for that, I'm eternally grateful, as are the residents of LaGrange. And as one of us mentioned, it's a great resource. There's a file for every address in LaGrange and LaGrange Park. So if you want to know something about your house, there's the place to go. I ended up doing different things, little projects for the Historical Society from time to time. And I always get good feedback, much appreciation. That's all owed to my mentor. If you want to know about history, check out the LaGrange Area Historical Society. And thanks to that quiet leadership for many, many years, you'll be quite impressed. It's all about evolution, and here we are. We started as a prairie, we became a farming community, then with trains, we became both a village, a town, and a shopping district, as you've heard before. And today, one of our mottos is vibrant. And I call this Vibrant 2.0 or 3.0. Because without the historic district being so designated, as you heard, we would have a highway. We have a highway going through LaGrange, but we don't have a 6-lane highway. And what stopped that, IDOT, from doing that was establishment of the historic district. So thank you, Janine. Thanks for all you've done and continue to do.
Mark knew I couldn't stay quiet, so I'm going to make mine really brief, though. But I do want to address Janine as I address the audience. I'm Steve Palmer. I live at 1010 41st Street. And Nancy, it was 78, 79 because I was in 7th and 8th grade at the time when we were putting all those bags on the meters. But Janine has been someone who has not only gone to every meeting and sat through all these things and took notes and was passionate about everything she did. If you grew up around here and with Janine and going to meetings and learning things, she kind of became the matriarch of our town at the time and a great trusted advisor to many village officials and many business people. But I would say that your greatest attribute was, Janine, that you were probably the greatest chess player of all time. And you just knew how to move them in the right direction or the pieces in the right direction at the right time and knock one out when it needed to be knocked out and bring another one in. But you were just a great chess player. You had a game plan and a game going on of your own for this vision, and you were able to sell so many people on it to join on board with you. And we are so grateful because of the community we have today is a lot because of the community that you helped us get through in the 80s and in the 90s and those times. And so you did so many great things. And I don't know how they got you here tonight because I know you hate to be recognized. But I'm so thrilled that you are here. And I'm so thrilled for what you did. And I will say to the village board, this is what happened in the 80s and 90s. Don't take for granted what's happening today as to what has already been accomplished. And don't rest on those laurels of those times. You need to make your own. And so that might be a TIF district to the south of 47th Street. That might be working on other things. But when this happened, there was no liquor in Hinsdale. There was no liquor in Western Springs. Countryside had already gotten, and Hotchkins had gotten in car dealerships and things like that. But they're now, everybody's catching up, and other communities around us are catching up, and they're all using TIF districts to make things happen and get better. I don't know necessarily what it is for our town, but let's not rest on our laurels, and let's not rest on the things. Let's live by the example Janine gave us and keep playing chess to keep LaGrange a great place that we live in and thrive in.
I think we do have a meeting to finish, so the thought was, President Kukler, if it's okay with you, after Mr. former trustee Eastman speaks, we could move on with the meeting and we could use public comments for any former, or are you?
Sure, I don't know if there's anybody that else is going to speak after Trustee Eastman. Just raise your hand so we know, and otherwise we'll move on. But please, Ken.
I'll be very short.
Take your time.
The one thing that I wanted to make sure that everybody here recognized is that the meeting tonight is probably one of the most special meetings that this village has ever had, because it includes almost all of the people who came out to recognize one of the most significant people in our community, and that's Janine McLaughlin. I can't recognize, and I sat through 12 years of meetings, and I can't remember the people that came out for someone that special in that entire time. The village of LaGrange has become an absolutely fabulous place to live, and I think it will continue to be that. But one of the things that we all have to recognize is that there are people who actually helped and created the foundation, and we just need to keep it going. Thank you very much.
Thank you. what absolutely fantastic testimonials. Just briefly, from my vantage point or story, I agree with all the speakers and how welcoming Janine was to me and how she did come to me and say, thank you for your service always. But I would go to a lot of these events when I first became a trustee with my wife and our 4 children. And unlike the Selvig children who sat quietly and politely, the Kukla children rarely, no, never did that. And, but Janine would go up to my wife and she would say, Deanne, you're a fantastic mother. Deanne, you're a great mother. Deanne, you're doing a great job. And for a mother who's kind of on their last wits with 4 kids running around, it meant a lot. And so Janine, from both Deanne and I do appreciate everything you did. That's why the board wanted to recognize you. That's why the community wanted to recognize you. And that's why today is the Janine McLaughlin Day. So let me read a proclamation recognizing this officially. Whereas the Village of LaGrange, Illinois, from its founding in 1879 and for nearly 100 years that followed, enjoyed a thriving community with a vast supply of well-kept, architecturally significant homes, and was also a popular and vital regional shopping destination. And whereas in the 1970s, LaGrange saw signs of neglect and buyers were reluctant to buy and maintain the village's older homes, leading to a trend of teardowns with developers purchasing multiple blocks of historic homes. And whereas the once thriving business community, a regional destination for shoppers, began to experience business closures and declines in sales tax revenues as a result of a nationwide shopping transition from town centers to shopping malls. And whereas during the time, a concerned group of residents went above and beyond to study the issues and develop solutions, with a pursuit leading to the formation of the LaGrange Historical District with the assistance from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which served to create pride in the ownership and preservation of older homes. And whereas resident-driven suggestions led to the adoption of a tax increment finance district, which afforded the village much-needed beautification, including streetscapes and facade improvements for businesses in the Central Business District. And whereas, in recognition and celebration of the extraordinary resident-inspired endeavors to save and preserve the village's wealth of historic homes and restore life to the business community. And whereas, while many participated in the decades-long revival of LaGrange, including the business owners, residents, and community leaders, it is agreed that one person was especially passionate and continues to be a critical catalyst and driving force for these efforts today. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Village of LaGrange, in recognition of her significant and transformational contributions to the village, does hereby proclaim Monday, June 24th, 2024, as Janine McLaughlin Day in the Village of LaGrange. Thank you, Russell. We under D, we have update on the statutory regulations and requirements. Oh, fantastic. Sorry, Russell, I wasn't sure exactly what you were doing, but thank you.
I'm very nervous. I thank you. Thank you. Um, I thank everybody here tonight. I thank everybody who put this together. I don't want to dissolve in tears, but I will try to keep my composure by saying that everything that you mentioned tonight, nobody does this alone. It takes thousands. I could write their names on these walls, responsible for the Historical Society and the way it is today. I can't tell you the number of people at the Historical Society when we first opened as a museum. We needed carpenters and plumbers and electricians, and as they What? Okay. I would ask them for a bill as they were leaving the back door, and they would say to me, not to worry. I cannot tell you how many people, the attorneys we turned to tell us what this IRS letter meant, who said to me, we'll take care of it, don't worry. The Historical Society owes thousands and thousands of people tribute to the way it is varied today. As for downtown LaGrange, you can't do this without good friends. Such good friends that when they see your name or they know your phone number, they don't say hello anymore. What they say is, how can we help? One of these days, I'm going to turn on my computer, and there I'm going to see the list of top 10 villages or communities in Illinois. And I look at them now, and I don't see our name. And I say, you've got to be kidding. One of these days, when they learn to measure the character of the people in their village, when they learn to understand that the people come forth because they want to give back. When those people who decide this list look at the goodwill of those people, then maybe I will turn on my computer and I will see the village of the Grange as number one. Yes. And then I will turn to the dear Lord and say, thank God Almighty, they finally saw the light. All right.
Thank you, Janine. Well said. Next up on the President's report is an update on the statutory regulations and requirements. To provide sufficient time for everything, I would ask if there's any objection from the board members to moving this item till after the manager's report. Oh, after public comments. I don't see any objections, so we'll do that. We'll make that move. All right, and I'd ask Village Manager Knight if there's any manager's report.
There is, and thank you, President Kukler. Resurfacing of Brainerd and Shawmut is progressing well with sidewalk, curb, and gutter removal and replacement taking place along Brainerd this week. Towards the end of the week, manhole replacements will begin along Brainerd Avenue. Rolling closures of the street will take place during the workday with detour routes posted. The installation of permeable pavers in parking lot 3 is also progressing well. Pavement removal has taken place with sewer and grading planned to occur next. As a reminder, while Lot 3 is unavailable for parking, the village has arranged for parking across the street and Cosset School blacktop. Those wanting to learn more about parking options are encouraged to visit the village's website. Looking ahead, village offices will be closed on Thursday, July 4th, in observance of Independence Day. We wish you all a happy Independence Day, and offices will reopen on Friday, July 5th. Last item is item A under the manager's report is part 1 of the comprehensive update to Title II of the Village Code. This is a continuation of the effort that began last meeting to develop a code that is more reflective of current day regulations and one that clearly articulates the values, requirements, and expectations of the community. Through collaboration with the consultant, staff, and village attorneys, proposed revisions are based on modern regulations, best practices, and operational considerations. First part of this, Title II, has been reviewed and is now presented for village board consideration. As before, this item includes a table listing more substantive changes, a summary explanation, as well as a clean and strike-through version of the Part 1, Title II. The proposed item is to capture thoughts and input of the village board on the proposed changes. That input will be incorporated into a final draft that will be presented to the village board later this year, which is anticipated for the fall. President Kukler, that concludes my report, and staff is happy to take any feedback the village board might have.
Thank you, Manager Knight. In that regard, at this time, I'd like to ask if any members of the village board have any input regarding the proposed update to Title II. Seeing none, if you have any updates, feel free to provide them to either Village Attorney Schuster or Village Manager Knight, and they'll continue with the progress. At this time, I'd ask Clerk Saladino to read the items under both the consent agenda, followed by items appearing under current business. So read as written.
Items on the consent agenda have been considered previously or been determined to be routine. Any member of the Board of Trustees may request that an item be moved from the consent agenda to be considered under current business. Item A, a resolution approving closed session minutes, determining the need to keep minutes of certain closed meetings of the Village Board confidential and authorizing the destruction of verbatim recording of certain closed meetings of the Village Board. Item B, June 24, 2024 consolidated voucher. Item C, minutes of the Village of Grange Board of Trustees meeting June 10th, 2024. Current business. Item A, a resolution approving a contract between the Village of Grange and J&F Paving LLC for the 2024 sidewalk replacement program. Item B, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with the Village of Grange Park for the administration of an adjudication court. That's it.
Thank you, Clerk Saladino. At this time, I would invite the public, if you have any comments on matters appearing on tonight's consent agenda. Seeing none, at this time, I would entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
I move for the approval of consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, trustees. Any discussion with regard to the consent agenda? Trustee Augustine.
It's very sensitive today. Thank you, President Kukler. Yes, as I've previously stated, I recuse myself from any voting on any items on the agenda related to the village prosecutor.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. Seeing no further comments, I'd ask Clerk Saladino for a roll call vote on the consent agenda.
Trustee Peterson.
Aye.
Trustee O'Brien.
Aye.
Trustee McGee. Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
Trustee Gale.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Moving on to the current business. Item A, which is the resolution approving a contract between the village and J&F Paving. There have been some questions raised, and I would like to entertain a motion to continue this matter until the next meeting to allow for staff to do a due diligence on this item. If anyone's so willing. Thank you, Trustee McGee. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Gale. On that, any discussion with regard to postponing this? Seeing none, I would ask for a roll call vote.
Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
Trustee Gale.
Aye.
Trustee O'Brien.
Aye.
Trustee Peterson.
Aye.
Trustee McGee.
And that passes unanimously. We'll readdress that at our next meeting, which is July 8th. And again, that will be our final meeting in July. Moving on to item B, the resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with the Village of LaGrange Park for the administration of an adjudication court. On April 8th, 2024, the Village Board approved Ordinance 0-24-09, which amended various sections of the Code of Ordinances and establishing an administrative hearing system. That action was one of several required in establishing an administrative hearing system. The effort also addresses a priority found in the 2024-2027 strategic priorities developed by the Village Board. In establishing the hearing system, the village has met with neighboring LaGrange Park on partnering together in establishing an administrative hearing system. Partnering with LaGrange Park offers several advantages, including the cost sharing for the services of an adjudicator, amassing a caseload sufficient to regularly hold administrative hearings, and defraying the costs of supporting the hearing process, which includes administrative support, personnel, equipment, and various other supporting resources. Representatives of each community have met on a few occasions to discuss the details of an arrangement and are agreeable on terms establishing the hearing process. The proposed intergovernmental agreement was collaboratively developed and captures the provisions of the agreement. Approval of the proposed agreement will establish the terms of the intergovernmental agreement and allow for the next step in the process, which is the development and issuance of a request for proposal for adjudicative services. May I have a motion and a second on this item?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Gale, Trustee McGee. And with that, any questions, comments regarding this?
Oh,
Trustee Gale.
just was wondering, how long does the, just for timing, how long does the RFP, like, how long does it go out for, response times? Just kind of curious, like when things will be up and running.
Have probably a few different questions packed in there,
Right.
but do we know the timeline yet on the RFP, and do we know when we hope to have our first hearing? How's that?
Sounds about right.
Works for me. Generally, we're targeting the fall for the first hearing sometime in October.
Oh, okay.
From there, we have an RFP that will be open. I would expect to be 3 to 5 weeks, somewhere in there. We're still working on finalizing the timeline for it. We are awfully close in having an RFP ready in draft form, and so we'll have that reviewed and then out shortly thereafter.
Okay. Oh, great. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Gale. Seeing no other questions, I would ask Clerk Saladino for a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
Trustee Gale.
Aye.
Trustee McGee. Trustee O'Brien.
Aye.
Trustee Peterson.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. At this time, I would invite the public to come up for matters regarding non-agenda items. Hey, now, Jan? Milo's going to come up and help you. Yep. It's the new system. Looks nice.
Thank you. Okay. Peg Monster with the League of Women Voters. Okay. Peg Monster with the League of Women Voters.
Peg, we're still having a little bit of trouble,
It says it's on.
I think.
Can you hear me now?
A little better.
Okay. Peg Monster again with the League of Women Voters. And just a kind of a housekeeping thing. I had been signed up to receive notification not only of this board meeting, but of other, Plan Commission, et cetera, meetings. And this month I didn't get any, and then found when I went to look for the agenda for tonight's meeting, looks like you had an upgrade to your the website, because the agenda was in a different place, and it was a little difficult to kind of get it to print out, because I was presented with kind of a two-sided presentation. Agenda on one side, that didn't seem to want to print. It may be just me getting used to it, but just wondered if that's still a work in progress.
Ms. Ozer, thank you very much. I think what you said was that you, haven't gotten a notification of a couple of the meetings. So why don't we address that first? Has anybody else notified us that? That's something we'll obviously look at, and we appreciate you bringing that to our attention.
I just wondered if it was in conjunction with the upgrade to the website, which is why I raised it.
Sure, yeah, I appreciate the question. We are in the midst of a transition to a new software system to accommodate our legislative process. So there has been a little bit of hiccups here and there, but we are working through those, and we do appreciate your patience as we get through it. If you have any questions or concerns, give us a call at the clerk's office. We'll be happy to walk you through.
Okay, should we be signing up for notifications again? Since and I'm not the only one.
We will be making use of those. It was, I think, an oversight this last time around.
Okay, thank you.
And the other one was the ease of using the system or something? Is that?
Well, maybe it's just me, but it seemed just a little kludgy.
We'll work on that. We'll try to print it from different computers and see if it can be improved. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
I've heard from a number of residents that they had trouble downloading the current agenda. They were first seeing the June 10th agenda, or it would be just the first few pages. So there might be some issues depending on.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine.
So I would like.
Are you jumping up there for comments not on tonight's agenda,
Yes.
Clerk Burns?
Because I want to second what this gentlewoman just said. I have had difficulty since last week trying to get the agenda. And I've tried it several times. What happens when you click on the November 24th agenda, you get June 10th. The only way I was able to get the agenda was I sent an email to one of the staff asking for a link. I then got it. So, old dog, new tricks. If you would post that things are changing and how to get those things that are reachable right now, it would be very helpful to people who are looking for that information.
Thank you, John. I'm sure we'll work on doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. President Hanson.
Mr. President and members of the board and village staff, I simply want to thank you for allowing us the whole 15 minutes for our presentation.
Thank you. It was a well-deserved presentation. We're happy that it went over. It was great. Seeing no other comments from the public, I'm going to go a little out of order, and that is I'm going to ask for trustee comments next. We are going to have a presentation put on by our village attorney. You're welcome to stay. It's more of a tutorial for the board, and we will not be taking any other votes or doing any substantive business. But again, it is a public meeting if you'd like to stay with that. So at this time, though, in case any trustee would want to talk to the public before they flee, I would open it up to you. Trustee Augustine.
I would just like to say one more thing about our esteemed guest, Janine McLaughlin. One thing that did get missed that she's been a significant contributor to for many years, many decades. It's very important to all of us here on the board and future members of the board is the Citizens Council of LaGrange. We have a couple past presidents of the Citizens Council, chairmen of the Citizens Council in this room, and everyone would agree that she has been not only helpful with leadership, but she's been helpful with putting packets together for candidates and making it palatable for people who are interested in running to feel like they can run. She's very supportive, always has been, and continues to be. And she's not hearing this, so we'll just make her watch this part on the YouTubes later on. But thank you. I just didn't want it to go missed that she was and is a very significant and important part of the Citizens Council. And so if you're not familiar with that, please join and look it up. But Janine, thank you for that. And I wanted to make sure that got mentioned. And a number of things have been missed. And also just, I'll apologize for embarrassing you, Janine, tonight. I couldn't ask for permission. None of us could. We asked for forgiveness, and you are here, and we are grateful. And we'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. Okay, seeing no other trustee comments, we'll move to the update on statutory regulations and requirements as part of the President's report. So next up is a presentation by our village attorney, Ben Schuster. It's kind of more a question and answer type of thing than Ben just lecturing us. So trustees, if you have any questions, jump in. I will probably jump in from time to time and say, let's dive a little deeper, or let's explore how the board feels about that or this. So again, don't be shy and feel free to speak up if anything catches your attention.
Nope. How about now? There it is. Okay. So, while we're loading here, I just want to say it was inspiring to hear all these great comments tonight, because, you know, public service in many forms, we're all dependent upon it. We're all better for it. Tonight, we're going to talk about various statutory requirements on the board, kind of a refresher. And it's meant to really talk about the tools that are available to all of you. Because if we don't comply with the statutes, if we don't comply with the procedures, then we can't be as effective as we want to be. So the first thing I kind of wanted to talk, we're going to talk about a couple different things tonight. The roles and responsibilities of the various public officials on our, you know, in the village, the Open Meetings Act, the Freedom of Information Act. Perfect, thank you. And ethics and conflicts. So, all right, so we all think of the federal government as three branches of government, which we all know, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. And the village, in many respects, works in the same way. Obviously, with the exception of we don't have the judicial, that's handled by the courts. But for the boards of trustees, that's our legislature. And we have the president and the 6 trustees, and we're the legislative policy-making body of the village. You have the power to spend, the power to tax, power to control for the public health and safety, sell property, buy property, and of course, you can only do it within the limits of the Illinois Municipal Code and other statutes that govern. You exercise power on the dais as trustees. And this is, I think, is an important concept to always remember is, as the legislature, the legislative body of this village, it is, you will have the power when you're sitting up here, but once you leave the dais, there is really no formal role. There's constituent services, but it is on this body is voting where that power lies. Conversely, we have the village president. The village president is the executive and has power off the dais. They have limited, when they're on the dais, limited powers to vote. So, little quiz here, powers to vote. When does the village president get to cast a vote?
There's a tie.
When there's a tie.
When there's a tie, any other ideas? That's one.
Or the quorum?
Not enough.
When you need enough, you have to have 4 votes in order to adopt something, a majority of the 7. So 4, so if only 3 trustees vote for something, we need a 4th vote. That's an opportunity. And on supermajorities. So if, for example, we're selling property, the supermajority vote that's needed, the president can cast a vote. President has the power to speak on behalf of the village, where a trustee doesn't get to speak for the village. They can speak for themselves, but it's the president who has the power to officially speak and represent the village off the dais, power to appoint, and also the power to direct staff. So, that's part of being the executive. We have the village clerk, which his responsibility is primarily set by state statute. So they're in charge of the village records, gathering records, keeping the records, making sure we comply with the Local Records Act, keeping records of the proceedings, the minutes that we all have for our open and closed meetings, and administer the election process on behalf of the village. And then we get to the village staff. We have headed up by Jack as the village manager, and our section of our village code on the manager talks about it's the chief administrative officer of the village and shall be responsible to the president and board for the management and operation of the departments. And importantly, I think one thing for best practices that's always good is to make sure that if anybody has questions, concerns, that we're routing them through the village manager to the staff who can manage and make sure that we're doing it in an efficient process versus, when you have a very important thing that somebody, a resident comes to you, I know it's very tempting to pick up the phone and, call Public Works, call somebody in police. Oftentimes, village staff knows, I know a lot of what's going on, and there's a backstory to a lot of it, and so I think it's always kind of a good practice to work through the village manager, and that's what our code provides.
So on that, are there examples that everything should go through the village manager? When should department heads be contacted?
So, some of that, Jack, I will leave up to you. I mean, it's kind of administrative practice. But generally, when you get an email, the best thing to do is email the village manager. Part of it is just coordination of resources. Part of it is, again, under our code and the way we set it up, they're the ones who are in charge of directing the various departments. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, but.
Nothing really much more than that. It is helpful to have one point of contact for the board because we do coordinate our efforts, and often it's my responsibility to know of all the efforts of our various departments, which helps in responding.
So the Open Meetings Act, you've all heard of this before. I know you all had to do training on the Open Meetings Act when you got elected, and these are the rules that govern transparencies of our meetings. And it matters not only because obviously we want to promote transparency and we believe in good governance, it's also, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say it, if we intentionally don't comply with this act, it can be criminal. So it does matter. The other thing that you should know is if we don't comply with it, and besides just the criminal compliance issues, is our actions can be voided. So we do things improperly, our contracts can be void.
So how many people have been thrown in jail due to violations of the Open Meetings Act?
12.
Ah, very good.
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I've never, I haven't heard of it, and and I say it, and when I bring up the criminality because I'm remiss if I don't, and it's really, I would think.
Trustee Gale, you want to be first?
No, I don't. I mean, absolutely right. But I also I bring it up so that no one,
It's intentional violations.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the inadvertent, our discussion if discussion in closed wanders a little, or we didn't, where there was an agenda posted, but instead of it 48 hours in advance, it was 47 by mistake. I don't think we worry about that. But more importantly, I do think what really matters is to make sure that we don't have our actions voided. We adopt a contract that's not properly on the agenda, that can be problematic. And we could be doing things where, and this does happen regularly, where the Attorney General rules that action is void and it's no, and it's not good. And then there's public embarrassment if we get an opinion that's against us. So the key to the Open Meetings Act is really the definition of what is a meeting. In the act, it says a gathering of a majority of a quorum for the purposes of discussing public business. Whenever we have that amongst the board, a gathering of a majority of a quorum to discuss public business, it's a meeting, which triggers all the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. So what is a gathering? It applies to contemporaneous communications between a majority of a quorum. And it can happen in person, like we are in this room, we have a majority of a quorum. It could happen on the telephone if you get a conference call, and 3 of you were to get on a call to discuss public business. But I want to warn you, it's the inadvertent places that can get us in the most trouble, which is on email. An email goes out and you hit reply all to the rest of the board, and it's why we always say, don't hit reply all on your emails because you start all of a sudden it's a conversation. It's not the first email that goes out, but the second, it can trigger a problem because that's not a publicly noticed meeting.
And just to interrupt, for anybody watching at home, our quorum is 4, so the majority would be more than 2. So
Correct.
3 or more.
Majority of a quorum would be 3, which is next slide, but yes. And then there's, also on Facebook and Twitter. If you go on somebody's Facebook page and people start talking and trustees chime in, and one talks and says, this is great, wonderful for LaGrange, great promotion, we love LaGrange, and another trustee a couple minutes later chimes in and posts and another one, that can trigger a meeting, which, as you'll see, we have problems because we aren't properly noticing. So,
what about liking? I mean, frequently we'll all like somebody's post.
So it's contemporaneous is the definition, so contemporaneous communication. So if you're all doing it, I'd be a little careful, particularly if you saw another trustee do it in the 5 minutes ago. Now, I can't give you a definition of what contemporaneous means because there's really no case law on it. So if one likes it now and one tomorrow likes it, and somebody posts in a week, you're probably okay. But the important thing is just to know if you see you're on a Facebook page, you are allowed to post, that is fine. But if another trustee has done it recently, be a little careful. Don't just immediately hit, I agree with Trustee Augustine, or I agree with Trustee Peterson. I too, think this is great. It can get us into a little bit of hot water. So just be careful. Majority of a quorum, the second piece to it, we have 7 members, quorum is 4, so majority of a quorum would be 3. And then what is public business? It's matters of the village that deal with public business. Now, there are some exceptions, political matters. It's election season. If there's a political caucus or political meeting that's independent of the village, not a problem. Social matters, you can get together if you all want and go for dinner. That's wonderful. That's great, as long as you're not talking public business. And then private business matters. If you wanted to say, hey, I have a great business idea, who wants to join in and talk about it? That's fine. Start a lemonade stand. Just don't talk about public business at that lemonade stand. So if there's the gathering of a majority of a quorum for the purpose of discussing public business, then you must post an agenda 48 hours in advance, except if it's an emergency. And those do happen from time to time, but you have to do it 48 hours in advance otherwise. Meet at a convenient location, like here. Take minutes and allow public comment. So, we have a slide up with a picture in it. Okay, at a village board meeting. And trustees are talking about public business. Is this a problem? Well, it depends. Is it during the meeting after the gavel has started it? It's fine. But if it's right before the meeting, 5 minutes before, 5 minutes after, that's the time in which the most common violations occur. And so we just want to be careful when we all come in, We can talk to each other and say hello, but it shouldn't be about public business. We wait and do that during the meeting.
Oh, so I'm confused with this. So if those three trustees right now just wanted to start talking amongst themselves and not sharing it with who's ever taking the minutes or doing whatever, that's allowed?
It should be out of order because it's not good decorum, but if it's during a public meeting that's properly noticed, it's not really an Open Meetings Act problem. The problem is, if it's before the meeting or after. So we adjourn and then we all stand around and go, that was a great meeting tonight. What do you think of that contract? Well, that's clearly after the gavel has ended the meeting. So it's best practice to do it through the microphones, but the key is when we come in and we leave, we still have to be careful. So one of the things, and I know this has led to some questions. Go ahead, Trustee Gale.
Are you going to give the same talk to all these commissions as well? Is that part of the plan?
So when we do trainings, we talk to them as well about it. So this is something, that everybody needs to know on all of our commissions, because they're subject to this as well.
So are you suggesting from being a liaison that maybe some of the boards and commissions could use a refresher on this? Or?
Yeah, if they're subject to the Open Meetings Act as well, they should understand the same requirements. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep, they all are. So one of the questions that we've recently encountered, and I know I've talked to some of you about it, is can trustees attend commissions and meetings, whether they're the Plan Commission or some of our other bodies, ZBA, Liquor Commission, Design Review Commission, and so forth, as can trustees attend? And the answer, and let's break this down because I think there's some nuance here, is, well, yes, they legally can show up. They can. We have a liaison system where there will be a trustee who's assigned to the Plan Commission or is assigned to the ZBA and so forth. They can attend. The issue is when we have the majority of a quorum attend. Because now if it's a Plan Commission meeting and you have a majority of a quorum of the village board that attends, you've triggered a public meeting almost of the village board. So remember, majority of a quorum, discuss public business, right? Contemporaneous communication. And so the question then becomes, if you have a majority of a quorum of the village board at a Plan Commission meeting, and they start to talk, the village board members, now we have a village board meeting. And I'm seeing some faces. And that's okay, let's talk about it.
I have to say this because I'm not giving up my right to attend the public meeting. Isn't that correct?
So you technically have a right to attend.
Yes.
However, and there's what's legal and there's what's best practice. Legally, you can attend. The problem isn't whether Trustee Peterson attends or Trustee Gale individually. But if 3 of you decide to attend, we have the first step towards a public meeting of the board. The second would be, is there a contemporaneous communication? So the concern is legally, is if everybody totally sits silent and says nothing at all, it's not a meeting of the village board. But the moment that a trustee starts to talk, then you could start to have an issue because now we start to have these contemporaneous communications. So if somebody on the Plan Commission says, Trustee Gale, you're the liaison, when is the village board going to consider this matter? Or what's the village board's take on this?
Right, but
and you talk.
Right, but is the issue speaking at all or who we speak to?
Well, it's a little of both.
Right.
So
what if it's not sorry to interrupt, what if it's not like a public, like I know somebody and I just talk to them. Hi, hello, how are you?
Well,
right.
If you're sitting in the audience and you turn to somebody, that's fine. Yeah. But the issue is when you talk and then somebody turns and says, Trustee Peterson, I see you're also here. What's your take on this? And the moment you open your mouth, now we have, if we have 3 trustees in the room, a contemporaneous communication, we've just triggered the Open Meetings Act problem.
Okay, then I have to ask this question. So we are talking, all right, we will go back over to the Plan Commission. So I was there and I'm sitting by myself.
Yep.
And the 2 other trustees are behind me. So we are not three of us together. And when I left my seat and walked out of the room, I did engage in conversation with another trustee.
And that's okay, one-on-one.
That's what I thought, one-on-one.
One-on-one.
So
is
it's not
absolutely
three
fine.
of us.
Right.
I know I feel like I'm walking into a gray cloud here. Is that true or not?
So you can talk one-on-one to each other at any time. That is just fine.
Okay.
But my concern legally is we're sitting, imagine this was a plan commission meeting, and somebody says, well, I see there's some trustees here. Trustee Gale, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
And he's the liaison, and he talks and says something. And then somebody says, well, Trustee Peterson, you're here. What do you think?
Yeah.
Now we start to have that contemporaneous communication, and we walk in inadvertently to a problem.
So my response would be, don't say anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, not saying at all. So, but it's risky. But that's where it gets a little risky. But the other part is a best practice, right? Which is, even if it's not a legal issue, we have a liaison system, and if for it to work effectively, that liaison is supposed to be the conduit between the board and that body, whether it's the plan commission or ZBA or whatever it is, to answer questions for them, to report back to the village board, so that's part of it. The other part, I think, and there's some other issues that can come up, one of which is that part of the idea is you all will have a chance to see an application when it comes here, and we want the plan commission not to feel, or the ZBA or whoever it is, to feel that their authority is impinged by the trustees. That the idea is that they sit there, they make the recommendation, and then it comes to the board, and you can ask all the questions you want. You can ask for information from staff. You can ask for presentations. You can ask for whatever you want, but then they don't feel impinged. The other part of it is also a matter of, and it's a board decision really for all of you, is if some trustees want to go, do other trustees then feel like I should be there as well? And now we have pressure perhaps to have the full board at one of these meetings. And so I will say that in all the municipalities we represent, it is traditional to have a liaison. It is not traditional to have trustees go otherwise. Now, this is really ultimately a decision really for the, I think expectations.
So why don't we delve down on that? And I've talked to Ben about this and at length, and he said, again, what he said today. There's two parts. There's legal, and there's best practices. So now we're on to the best practices. Do we as a board want to follow what our attorney is saying, best practices? Or are we saying, as a board, we feel that we'll follow the legal advice, but it's not best practices for our community. Our community is different for some reason, and we don't want to follow that. And I'm open for feedback on that.
Well, I would just say, we all know which meeting we're talking about. It's pretty rare.
Let me just stop. I don't want to go only back on what happened at one meeting in the past, and much more want to talk about how do we want to deal with meetings going forward.
Okay, yeah.
And it isn't just one meeting, I will say.
Okay.
This question has been asked to me about multiple bodies. It's been Plan Commission, we had the Liquor Commission, there was a question. It's not just one.
Okay.
Two
recently, but it's pretty rare that in a meeting like this, unless there's more, at least this year, that you can tell me about. There's a couple of problems, so this goes to your question, President Kugler. I think that a lot of members of this board feel like we're not getting the adequate tone and tenor of a plan commission meeting, for example, by reading what's in the board packet. And the liaison, typically, traditionally, recently, all of us have served as liaison boards. We don't give a lot of context. Hey, well, I was there, and here, let me tell you a little bit about this besides what's written in the document. I think we need to maybe do a better job of that. I think the reason that independently multiple trustees showed up to that plan commission is because it was a meeting. It was the first of its kind in a long time. We all felt it was super important. And we ended up showing up. In the future, and we've done this before, I think we all kind of do it instinctively. If we think someone's going to show up, hey, are you going? Because I don't want to go if there's too many people there. So we could try to make a habit out of that, so we're doing best practices and we're legal. I don't think any of us feel like we have to be there, but a lot more of us do want to be at these certain types of meetings. And you'd said before that 3 then constitutes something that should be a meeting, but the Liquor Commission is always 3. So how does that differ?
So the difference with the Liquor Commission is it's a designated body of 3 trustees, or village president, 2 trustees. And so because of that, when it's noticed, it's clear what it is. It is a Liquor Commission, and we put out the agenda, we meet the statutory requirements. But it is problematic if other trustees want to come to that, because then you have 4 trustees and you end up with a meeting of the village board. That's not even a majority of a quorum, that is a quorum of the village board. And I will tell you, and part of this decision of best practices is if there is a particular meeting of particular importance, or for whatever reason, the format's going to be different. And I know we did it with the comprehensive planning session where we did an agenda and noticed it up as a joint meeting of multiple bodies. But that takes planning and work, but there is a way to do it that puts us all in a safe spot under the Open Meetings Act. But it takes a lot of work to do it. And so, again, I think it goes back to understanding, number one, if you are going to go to a meeting, I think it's really best practices to notify the village manager, so that way we can plan accordingly. But then a decision, I think, really by this board of how does it want to operate, because we don't want to have a situation where we have a bunch of people showing up and we accidentally end up in a violation of the Open Meetings Act.
I do want to stick on what Trustee Augustine said, in keeping with, diving down on 2 things. One, both under the best practice umbrella, and that is the first one, not getting the tone and tenor of the meeting. And if other trustees feel that, or is that something we can work on as liaisons to do a better job? Any discussion on that portion?
Yeah. Thank you, President Kukler. I'm going to say, first of all, I really respect what the Plan Commission, the Community Economic Development Commission, the Design Review Commission, what they all do. And I rely on their recommendations when I have to make a decision at the board. So that needs to be said. And my first, I guess it was first year, it was I was on EQC, which is what I came from. So I had some familiarity with that, and on most recently Community and Economic Development, and I requested Zoning Board. So I've learned a lot, and I will work harder to communicate the meetings that I have attended as liaison, because I will say, I agree with Beth's, Trustee Augustine's comment. That's why I have attended in the past, and if it is the majority of the opinion that we rely on the liaisons, then it's on me to do a better job to the commission that I have been assigned to. And that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. What are your thoughts?
Well, maybe I'm being too simplistic, but like if we go and just keep our mouths shut, right? That's okay, right?
It's legally okay. It wouldn't go under the best practices in that the commission is saying, could be saying, why are they here on this issue? Which way are they going? Oh, I want to Trustee Gall seems to be the most interested in this issue, which just because you came to that meeting, I don't think is true. But somebody on the commission, whatever it is, could think to themselves, Trustee Gall is most interested because he came. I'm going to call Trustee Gall and ask, how does he feel about it? That's the problem really I have, is the beginning of the problem I have. Because you're going to respond to that person, I guess, they called you. You're inclined, or human nature is inclined to start communicating with that, and it's a problem. We haven't allowed the commission to evaluate it fully, and they're asking for your thoughts. Your thoughts are premature because we need the commission to develop. And now you may have said, well, you know, I'm really against density, or I'm really against this thing, or really against that, and that could be a real problem. So that's the beginning of my thoughts on when we have people now that are trustees attending these public meetings. It's changing the role that we have. Again, by law, you absolutely can legally do it. By law, you can't start talking publicly because it's going, you know, the chances of triggering an open meeting violation are so much. But let's delve down on what people think. If you are going to attend one of these meetings, is it appropriate for you as a trustee, what do you think, to talk with your good friend, your neighbor, a person you just met about, hey, this is what I'm thinking? Or if it's a developer, to talk to the developer and say, hey, I have a couple of questions. What are you going to do on parking? Is that appropriate? Not.
Yeah, so I mean, just to follow up on that, I mean, my thought always goes to then, you know, the critique of the disinterested board, right? So then it's like, you guys don't show up at any of this stuff. You sit up there, I mean, because literally, like on these issues, right? Like they could come in front of us and we could just not even say anything and vote, right? Like we could shoot something down that went all the way through and everyone would be like, what the hell happened? Right? Like,
absolutely.
You know, and that's what or the opposite, you know, we just approve something. Everybody's like, well, I mean, no. I mean, because I actually do feel just generally as a trustee compelled to explain when I vote for something other than, you know, our
let me say, I think those are two hugely different things. Let me stop you for 1 second. Two hugely different things. I think explaining why you are voting, especially on critical issues, is important and is helpful for the public. Going back and saying, well, I care, and that's why I'm going to commission meetings, I go the complete opposite way. I think it's the absolute wrong signal that if you're signaling that you care and that's why you go, that's wrong. The good governance practice is if somebody came up and said, you did not go, and I'm village president, I hear this, I don't go to those meetings because I'm trying to follow good governance, and they say, why didn't you go to that meeting? It's that building's 3 blocks from your house. I respond, that's not our role. Our role is to allow the commission to do their work, and then our role as a board is to do it. I think it's troubling if you're suggesting that you can show the public you care more by attending these meetings.
And to me, the dividing line, again, maybe it's, you know, I think of the old joke about the most dangerous place in the world is between a politician and a microphone, right? Like the danger is we're there, we will get asked things, and then we will talk because that's what we like to do. But to me, like you know, my thought was that's the response you give. You know, you're at a meeting and it's like, what are you doing here? Be like, because I think I've practically said that at like meetings where, as the liaison, like someone's like, well, what do you think? I'm like, I'm going to let them do their stuff, and then I'll let you know what I think once they do their stuff.
Well, all right.
Yeah.
I think we're missing 2 trustees, but I'm getting a flavor from 3 of the trustees would like to, as a LaGrange board, attend commission meetings and plan commission meetings and other board and commission meetings. Am I getting that from you?
I mean, from time to time, I think it's complicated, and I'm certainly glad it's coming up, but I would hate to be told I can't do that when it's something that's unique and I want to kind of have a first-person view of it, not necessarily to show that I was there, but because I really want to understand it. I don't think it's going to happen that much, and it hasn't happened that much, but we should be prepared for it. But I think that it's showcasing problem's not the right word, but an issue that we have that I feel like we don't have enough information. On certain things, it's crystal clear from the notes. And on others, we want the context. So maybe when those things come out, we can start to communicate that. I think it's, you know, not going to be too many. And I know I'm maybe splitting hairs here, but, you know, we're being told to funnel everything through the village manager. You know, in the days gone by, I would call Public Works and just, hey, what do you know about this? But now I'm feeling like I've got to funnel everything through there, through the village manager, always, and I usually do, but not always, and I will if that's what we want. But, you know, we're residents and we're curious, and that's why we're here. And I think if our gut tells us, show up for that meeting, I'd like to be able to do that, and I will be happy to share it in a BCC'd email to the fellow trustees so that we're careful. The optics are very important, of course, and I think we know now, and we didn't then talk, with the exception of the Liquor Commission meeting. We don't plan to have a dialogue. We certainly don't think we're intimidating commissions in doing so. And again, it's fairly rare, but I think what it points out is that there needs to be more information about what is happening in some of these meetings, and potentially some joint meetings with Plan Commission and with ZBA so that we can talk through some things, because they don't know how we feel and we don't know how they feel at all times. And there's probably some code that needs changing. There's probably some zoning that needs to be looked at. And if we do that together, we can probably get to where we need to be faster. And we don't do that. And so I'd love to be allowed to still talk to my neighbor who I know on a commission after a meeting one-on-one. Is that okay? You know, we're just trying to understand it so that we vote well-informed when it does come to us, because ultimately it's our vote that makes it law.
There's a lot there, and I want to hit it, but the one thing that triggered, I think that it's a great example. Something's before the Plan Commission, ZBA. It's going to be a couple of meetings. Your friend, your neighbor, your acquaintance serves on that commission. Is it a good practice for a trustee to call and say, hey, how's the meeting going? What are you thinking? What are you hearing?
You know, I think there can be arguments either way in terms of, you know, talking to those who are on a plan commission or ZBA during a matter. I would say the one thing we want to be careful of is it is a public hearing process, and a plan commissioner, a ZBA member, their decisions, their evidence, their facts that they're listening to should really be at the meeting itself in front of a microphone. You know, I also think from what I've seen in my practice, you know, for the last 15 plus years, is so much of this is really about not one, but two reviews of an application. The plan commissioner ZBA piece of it, and then it comes here, and I would say starts over, but now we have a whole new fresh set of eyes. So instead of one set of eyes in communications, now there's scrutiny at a village board level has oftentimes a very different view on it. And that's a good thing. And if we push the two together so it becomes one process, we kind of lose that. But I guess to get back to the real question, I think, number one, I think most vitally, it's communication. If you are inclined to go, to talk to the village manager early, so we can say, okay, I'm hearing from 4 trustees or 5 trustees, there's a topic of immense interest, and so we can figure out how to do it, whether it's a joint meeting or if it's something that, you know, that's not, we're going to provide, you know, a report. If it's going to be, you know, some communities, you know, a lot of communities, they do not videotape every plan commissioner ZBA meeting. But if there's something of a particular nature, you know, that's a policy decision of how you all want to do it. But I think the key is to have some continued conversation about this, about how to do it. Because I will tell you, in a plan commission meeting that gets intense, and I have not seen one here, fortunately, that has gotten that intense, but I can tell you it's not so easy just to say, I'm not talking. You know, I've been at them where you have people who jump up and are grabbing the microphone screaming, and if your trustee was there, they're going to turn and say, what do you think about this? And shove a microphone in your face. And are you really not going to say something? You know, and at some point it becomes, then we're opening ourselves up. And so I think there needs to be some game plan and rules about how we're going to go forward, because the worst thing is when you have 3 or 4 of you here and it is a meeting, and we will have intense meetings at some point. We will. Every community does. then what do we do? Because we do not want to violate the Open Meetings Act. So, you know, I don't want this to derail the rest of the discussion tonight either. But, you know, I do think there, you know, it's important to have some consensus of where you want to go with it. But put aside the Plan Commission. We've had other meetings where.
Right. I don't want to just again. I don't want to talk about a meeting that we had.
Right.
That doesn't seem to accomplish anything. What I do want to try to get out is where the board feels comfortable. And again, it sounds like several trustees feel comfortable attending these commission meetings. And if that's the case, then I'd like to delve down further on that. Now, again, I'd be leaning towards don't attend, but if you're going to attend, what is the appropriate behavior? Because without, you know, addressing Trustee Augustine, I do think it seems inappropriate to me to having a pending matter and talking to the commissioner at length about how they're feeling on it before they rule. I think that you don't have the ability to wear your hat as just a public resident. And if I was a public resident, I could talk to the Plan Commission about something before it's there. I think as trustee or board member, we have a different role. And it's important that we don't start expressing our opinion until it gets to the board, till it's on the dais. But that's me, as one of seven.
Well, I just want to be clear that I did not have an extensive conversation with the commissioner before the vote. It was a short conversation.
I absolutely believe that.
Yeah.
If I can be even more clear, I promise you, I'm not talking about any past meeting ever. I'm only talking about the future and only about the board in total and saying, to me, it's not right for a trustee to be talking to a commissioner while the matter's pending before the commission. I think it's different after the commission rules, and if you have a relationship with them, saying, hey, you know, how was that? And you hear them. I personally have seen that occur. That's different than before the member votes.
And one thing I may suggest, and something to kick around as an idea, some communities, what they'll have is a chair or somebody else assigned from one of the commissions come to the village board when the matter comes here and report to the board.
I would love that.
And so there's multiple ways that this can be accomplished, where there's communication and so forth. But the ground rules need to be established so we don't have.
Well, let's pick up on that, because Trustee Augustine said, I love that. What's the board's feeling on having, when we're making presentations, or, you know, again, some are more, we all know some are more important than others, having a member of the board coming to this board?
I'm going because I'm seeking information. And none of you are going to believe me when I say I'll try really hard to shut up. I know that. But I'm serious when I say I'm going because I am seeking information because I know of votes coming from me. And I want to be confident in my decision making. So what you're proposing, the chair of a commission or a member of a commission is coming and presenting to the board, that works for me. That works for me.
Okay.
I like that idea too. I did also want to ask, is there any Attorney General opinion or case law on these kind of issues that overlap between different boards and commissions that could give us some guidance as to what is the best practice?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think there are some. I'd have to go back and look. There's certainly, so with the Open Meetings Act, and if you'd like me to pull some, I'm happy to get some opinions, and I can do a report to you. More than, I can do that. Now with the Attorney General, they do about 15 binding opinions a year, and they do about 3,000 non-binding, which are not published, and that's where the meat of this information is. Mm-hmm. But I can certainly call the Attorney General's office and get some of those opinions.
Or should we apply for a non-binding opinion?
They will not do advisory opinions. So
How do we get one of the 3,000?
somebody files a complaint saying we violated.
we don't want to do that.
Exactly.
Never mind.
We don't want.
We're not looking for
wanna
that.
do
No. What I can do is I
Bad route.
have contacts in the office. I can call up and say, can you send me some opinions on this, non-binding opinions, and provide more guidance. But yeah.
All right, Ben. So it sounded like your idea of having a board or commissioner come to the board meeting on significant cases has some legs. People are interested in that, so we'd like to explore how communities do that.
Yep.
Trustee Augustine also brought up joint meetings, having meetings with a plan commission and the village board or a ZBA and the village board. What's your experience on that?
So there's two ways to do it. One of which is if more you're in the audience and we're doing it kind of belt and suspenders to make sure we comply with the Open Meetings Act. And the other is a truly interactive meeting between this board and another board. You can do it.
Let me stop you. I'm not so concerned about how we legally do it because I realize we could post it and it'd be an open meeting. What I'm asking is, what have you seen where this works? What do we do? Do we once a year invite the plan commission to come present to us and talk about things that are interested to them? Does the board tell things to the plan commission that are interested? How does it work?
So it's not that common, but where I was going was to say that you could have a joint meeting that's interactive, and it's usually on topics, not specific applications for like, a special use or plan development. It tends to be more on comprehensive planning issues.
Yep, that's what
or
I'm saying.
perhaps you want to have a discussion if we're doing a major rewrite of a code section. So the last time I did one of these was, in Lake Bluff, they did a joint meeting when they were talking about rewriting their plan development article of their zoning code. So they did a joint meeting so that way they could have a real roundtable discussion. So I think it's topic-based of what works really well, but those types of topics lend themselves to potentially having some joint conversations.
So similar to what we had here on the comprehensive plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Did those address the things you've brought up? Did I miss any?
No, I think you got it. I mean, I like the idea. It's certainly better than not going at all, but I don't have any near future plans to go to any other commission meetings other than the ones I'm liaison for in the near future. But I think I'd like to be able to say that, if it's something that's very important to me, it's something I've been talking about for years, hope that I have the opportunity to reach out to Jack Knight or President Krugler and say, hey, I'm planning to go. Just letting them know that and sit in the way. I'll wear a mask.
Absolutely. You're definitely legally entitled to go. There's no question on that.
But and also we're not contentious, right? I think we are very fortunate in this town, amongst other things that we talked about tonight. I think there's no animosity between boards that I'm well aware of. There might be some, chafed things that happen, but and we don't want to assume that that will always stay the case. But we're not going to put pressure on anybody, and I think that most would say that they don't feel that. It could change, and I'm aware that that's why we want to have protections. Yeah. But it's I think that if someone reports to us, I guess the only problem I have is a lot of times these plan commissions are a month or 2 weeks before we vote on it. If they come the night we vote on it, we don't have the opportunity to spend time thinking about what we've just learned.
Well, and that of course is up to all of you and the questions you ask, and if you want revisions to a plan and you see it and you say, and you work through the applications, and you have that right too. So, but I'm glad we're having these conversations because I'll tell you, it is much better than when we're all standing around in the hallway going, okay, I'm counting trustees, what do we do? And Jack and I have been there, and we've seen it, so it's we can plan for it, we can deal with it. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. The next topic of the Open Meetings Act is closed session, and with the closed session routine, we're really good at it. Just a couple of things to hint, to touch on real quickly is, as when we go, to go into closed session, it takes a roll call vote after a motion, and then we can only discuss certain topics, and just remember these are very, very narrow, and it's why I will sit there in the room and say, okay, this is why we're only discussing this, is because if we wander, we too far astray, we put ourselves at risk, because it's very narrow topics that we can discuss.
Let me just interject. Any questions on closed meetings? We kind of gone over. I think we do a pretty good job on those.
So Freedom of Information Act, the good part is you don't have to process these, unlike staff. So there's not a ton you need to know, but there's a couple things just to remind you of, is that all records that are in the custody or possession of the public body that relate to public business are subject to FOIA. Now, as a trustee or village president, here are the rules, because this has been the most litigated, one of the most litigated issues over the last, really since 10 years. So with FOIA, there was a famous case called City of Champaign versus Madigan, and it was a room just like this down in Champaign, and a reporter was sitting out in the audience, and the reporter saw trustees using their cell phones, sending text messages to each other, and their laptops sending emails, and they knew it because one would do it, and they'd look down the dais and smile and laugh, and they would go back and forth the entire meeting, and a FOIA was submitted saying, I want those emails. City of Champaign said, well, they're on people's individual personal email accounts or their own cell phones. These are their private text messages, not subject to FOIA. And this went up through the courts, all the way to the appellate court, and they said, for trustees, it is a public record when you're sitting on the dais. If you send text messages when you're on the dais, it's a public record because it's in the possession of the public body because you are the public body when convened. However, and this is the key, is when you're not on the dais and you send that text message or that email, it's not subject to FOIA if it's on your personal account. Hold that thought for a moment. Village president is different. Rahm Emanuel, mayor of Chicago, got into a lawsuit with the Better Government Association, and they said, well, the executive is different. That the mayor is always the mayor, not when he's just on the dais, but when he's mayor of the city. So for mayors and village presidents, if it's about public business, it's a public record subject to FOIA. So the takeaway is the law today is if you're using your personal email account, not subject to FOIA. However, that I do think will be overturned at some point. So
which one is going to be overturned?
The Champaign case. And I think it's going to be for all trustees at some point, if it's about public business, it doesn't matter how you send it. And my best advice to you is just don't put things down in paper or email unless you're comfortable with it being made public. Be careful. You know, the joke that you make that's, you know, seems snippy and funny at the moment, 6 months later when it comes out and it's in the paper, isn't so funny. So just be careful and mindful.
All right, any questions on freedom of information?
I'd only want to share like an analogy to that, which is like in professional settings, people, you know, you end up in litigation and people send emails and they think, okay, my emails. And then I'm like, okay, I need your cell phone too. And they're like, well, why do you need my cell phone? I'm like, did you communicate at all with anybody about the project using your cell phone? Like, yeah. I'm like, well, they're going to want to see that too. Like, I know it's your private cell phone, but it's not, you know, it's still discoverable as an analogy.
And there are some exemptions under FOIA, and I have a couple on the screen: private information, your social security number, somebody's home address, attorney-client privilege information with me, you know, when we communicate, but assume it may be made public. The other thing I'll say, and this is also vitally important, is when we have something of immense public interest, think of the sheer volume for our staff. And I will give you an example. So we had a community that several years ago had a situation where police had to use lethal force. And it was a bad situation, nothing nefarious, but unfortunately, but lethal force had to be used. And our client got several, numerous FOIAs on it. And the problem was there was, public interest is high. Everybody wants to know, particularly in this climate, was it legitimate or illegitimate use of force? And the sheer volume of emails, I'm talking having to review 10,000 pages of documents, and a lot of them were things like individual, trustees who say to the village manager, the police chief, just checking in, I know it's a tough day. Hope everything's okay. Is there anything I can do to help? Is everything going well? The innocent emails, but when you're sending it out and replies back and forth, emails multiply and it just adds to sheer volume. So if we ever have major events in town or whatever it is, just be mindful of volume. Your staff will thank you because we have to comply, and once it hits our server, we're gonna have to process it, and it's just a lot more work. The last topic I wanted to cover are ethics. This is one of those topics where I don't anticipate issues, but I'm remiss if we don't cover it because it's the inadvertent that gets us into trouble sometimes. So the first thing we need to know about ethics is the Prohibited Political Activities Act and those regulations. And so officers and employees are not permitted to engage in prohibited political activities during compensated time. Now that's more obvious when it's an employee. If they're on the clock, they cannot be doing political stuff. For elected officials like yourselves, it's anytime you're in Village Hall and anytime you're doing the village's business. Okay?
The one thing I've probably seen and maybe done, passing petitions, bringing them to a village board meeting and saying, hey, trustees, will you sign my petition? Obviously not allowed.
It should not be done in Village Hall. The best practice is go outside after a meeting, not during a meeting, and make sure that it's done off village property. But totally fine to give them to each other, but not when we're on a compensated time. And then we can't
or for us, uncompensated time.
Uncompensated, but it still applies when we're sitting at the dais, shouldn't be doing it. Last thing is you can't condition employment of our staff on helping with your, can you go run, hey, hey, Maureen, can you go run this copy for me for my petition? Hey, can you go make this political flyer for me? Can't do that. So there are many prohibited political activities on the screen. This is the stuff we talked about. It also includes wearing buttons. Vote for me when you're on the dais. Don't do it. If you want to wear buttons when you walk off the dais and go home, great. So then there's the State Officials Employee Ethics Act. If you read this, it's all about state employees. And you're going to go, why? It doesn't apply to me. I'm not a state employee, and that's true. But in the act, it actually says municipalities have to adopt this too. And if you read our code, we have in one of the code sections you looked at tonight in Title II is like verbatim this act for you. And what it basically says is that you are cannot solicit and accept gifts from prohibited sources, okay? Can't do it, you get yourself in trouble, it's a crime. So what does that mean? Well, a gift is anything that's tangible or intangible item having monetary value. So whether it's a good or a service, if it has monetary value, you cannot accept it from a prohibited source, which is someone seeking municipal action, someone who does business with the village, okay? Someone who conducts activities regulated by us, someone with interests that may be substantially affected by us. Most obvious scenario I've seen is I went to a plan commission meeting for a health spa. The next meeting, or after that meeting, but before the plan commission voted, all the female members got a gift card saying, when we open, please come to our gift spa. Here's $200 at our spa. It was both sexist because it only gave it to half the board, but it was also problematic because their acceptance of this would clearly violate this act. But sometimes it's not so obvious. And so this is, I want to get into a couple things. Number one, there are some exceptions to it. So lawful political contributions. Somebody is allowed, if you're running for office, to say, I think you're great. I want to see you continue on the board. I'm making a contribution. And if it's a lawful political contribution, that's fine. Gifts from relatives or friends. Somebody may be seeking, seeking something here, from one of you. And at the same time, you've known them for 40 years and they're giving you a gift because you've been best friends since college. Absolutely fine. So it's really the intent there. But if you believe that gift is because of their connection to village business, that's a problem. Educational materials and missions. So for example, when we do our biennial seminar and we invite you down, to where we're hosting it, and we put on an educational seminar, that is absolutely fine, or IML or whoever, it's educational. You can get reimbursed for travel expenses, that's allowed by the village. Food and drink up to $75 a day. So we can say, let's go for a cup of coffee, and I buy you a cup of coffee. That is perfectly fine. But importantly, you know, what do you do if you get a gift that's bigger? Hey, want to go to the Cubs game? I have an extra ticket. I'd love to take you, and I'm a village contractor. Can you do it? The answer is yes, but you have to fix it by giving money to a charity or donating it. So you could say, thank you for the ticket, Ben, that's very nice, I'm going to donate it. Or you could say the ticket value is $200, so I'm going to give $200 to a charity of my choosing, and then it's not a problem. But that's how you fix it. And if there's any questions and you receive a gift, because this could be criminal, and you aren't sure, that's what I'm here for. Give me a call, shoot me an email, let's talk about it, because we can fix it. The worst is if you aren't sure but you don't ask, and then it's too late. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was conflicts of interest, okay? And there's two types. The first one is much easier to deal with because you know what it is, which is a public official can't have a direct or indirect interest in any contract or work. So if you own a business and that business is a contractor to the village, that's a problem. It cannot be cured. So if that's the case, please come to me and talk to me. But I know it's not. So that's what I really don't worry about. The other is the common law conflict. This is the one that we see far more often. A common law conflict arises whenever an official action could result in personal advantage or disadvantage to the interested official. So what does that mean? You are a fiduciary of the village. You have a fiduciary duty, you should have unencumbered loyalty to the village. But if any time somebody wants something and they come before you and you have to question, well, I'm really good friends with that person. You know, now all of a sudden you have a different pull that may be against your fiduciary duty. So that's the common law conflict of interest, something that may compromise your fiduciary duty. And so when you have one of those, the way we deal with it is you recuse. So how do we recuse? Well, we disclose. I have a conflict. So when we call the item, you state what it is. 2, you refrain from participating in any way. You don't debate it and then say, but I'm just not going to vote on it, but I think you guys should. It's a good idea. Vote for it. I'm not. That doesn't work. You have to refrain from discussion and all debate. The best practice is to leave the room, is to get up, you state what it is, and you walk out of the room till we're done deliberating and voting and you come back. Now, the one exception, I know it's one that's common, is because otherwise you could never be able to vote on the warrant list, and so we have the procedure we use that meets requirements, but generally, particularly if there's going to be a debate on an item, the best thing to do is to leave the room. And then, of course, you abstain from voting. So, the last scenario, 3 houses on the screen. You live in the first one. The third house on the street comes to us because they want a variation or a special use in zoning. They're 2 doors down from you. Is it a conflict?
Could be.
I hear it could be. How many think there's a conflict? They're 2 doors down. How about if it's the house in the middle, right next to you? Is it a conflict?
Depends what it is, right?
Well, so sometimes people think, well, if we're close, it's a conflict. Not necessarily. It's going to be case specific. We're in a small town. You are going to know people who come before us. That doesn't make it inherently a conflict just because you know them. It could be a store you shop at regularly. That does not necessarily make it a conflict. The question is, can you fulfill your fiduciary duty 100% faithfully to the village, or is it something where you say, I can't be fair on this because, it's on my block. Maybe you've never met them. Maybe it's a non-issue.
I want to dive in a little bit because I disagree. I would have gone with no conflict more than conflict. If I've had before me serving as trustee 10 times, people have come and said, I want to build an 8-foot fence, but only 6 foot's allowed. And I said, voted no every single time. You can't build an 8-foot fence. And the neighbor next to me says, I want to build an 8-foot fence, and I'm going before the board, and you can't vote because you're my neighbor, and it's actually going to be on your lot line or your property. It's going to be close to your lot line. I still think I should be able to vote. I'm not violating my fiduciary duty. I would have voted this if it was on the farthest side of the town.
And that's your decision. And, it's not a statutory conflict. It's a common law, question of a common law conflict. And it's whether or not you have a conflicting interest. Remember, go back to that definition. Could it have resulted in a personal advantage or disadvantage? And it's subjective. You know the facts better than anybody, and you're going to have to make a judgment. And you could make the determination on those facts. It's not going to help me one way or the other. It's not going to increase or decrease my property value. Now, somebody can make a counter to that, say if it's directly next door, that's an easier case to make that than the house that's going to be 2 doors down, which isn't probably going to impact your value because of a foot of fence. But it is case specific. But the important part, I think, to remember is in a small town like LaGrange, you're going to have to do that analysis each and every time if you think you may have a conflict. And sometimes you may and sometimes you may not. And we're here to help you do that. So again, that's one of those where if you think there's a question, give me a call because we can talk about it ahead of time. It's easier ahead of time than it is after the fact.
I asked you if I could continue being an election judge. And I know when my name is on the ballot, no, that is not appropriate. But I have been contacted because election judges are hard to come by. Particularly post-pandemic, they have several, the need is great, they keep contacting me. So is that a conflict of interest outside of LaGrange for something like the federal election, where now the consolidated, yeah, I'll stay out of that, but.
I think I'll play this out. It's a hard one. It's a decision you have to make, and it's not so straightforward. So I'll give you 2 scenarios. Generally speaking, it's much less obvious of a conflict than if it was the Village of LaGrange election. And it's your political opponent or the person, if someday you want to run for village president and you want to knock them off a ballot, right? So it is completely different when it's a federal thing. That said, have you ever gone to federal officials as a village and asked for grant money? And if you have officials that you have relationships with that does the village good, and that you've worked with, is again, do we have a problem where, it's the best thing to do when it could impact one way or the other? You say, look, I'm trying to be fair with my fidelity as an election judge, but this congressperson has been great for LaGrange, and I know we're going to go back to them on stormwater to ask for money. So it can get a little wonky. I don't think it's a technical conflict, and it's a gray area. And if you want me, I can look further and look at some opinions.
What as an election judge could she do? If the issue came up, hey, your signs are too close to the polling place, can't she say, well, I'm not going to get involved in
Well,
signs?
as an election judge, I review signatures. So that's what I've done in the past. So I determine whether or not somebody's votes. That's the biggest one I would say, is that when I was in a role, I'm looking at someone's signature to determine if that individual is the person whose documentation is in front of me. And that's the basis of the right to vote.
I will say that on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm much less concerned about the federal than I am if it's LaGrange municipal.
But what's coming to mind, what you said about grant money, that's Congressman Garcia is coming to mind.
So. Yep. But I'm glad you're asking these questions because, again, we can work through them. So, and that's really all I have. So I know that's...
Awesome, Ben. Thanks. But before we end, Any trustee you want to delve back into any topic, anything that you wish was covered that we can cover another time?
I would just say a couple things that you've mentioned and your predecessor, Mark Berkland. If you want to, FOIA issues, if you put the word, first of all, if it's between you and I, it's confidential automatically. Or if I put confidential in the subject line, something to that.
You don't need to label it confidential.
Okay.
So if it's about legal, if you're seeking legal advice from me, or I'm giving you legal advice, it's attorney-client privilege. If you're talking to me about something else entirely, it is not. But if it's for legal advice, regardless, does it hurt? It can only help if you label it attorney-client privilege, confidential, just because it's, if it has to get reviewed, it's more obvious, but it's not needed.
And you got to be careful who's CC'd on it.
Right. If it stays within the village leadership, it's okay. If you have a resident and you say, I want to put you in touch with the village attorney, and then email me with the resident that's on it, now there's a third party that's not part of our control group, then we don't have privilege.
Beth, anything more?
Yep, good question.
Anything? Ben, again, thank you. We really appreciate it. It's helpful. I know you spent a lot of time preparing, so thanks a bunch. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn at 10:17.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, trustees. All in favor, say aye.
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 And the meeting is adjourned.